Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Yeah, I know. Because I can't get right. This is cutthroat. This burns as words pop from a snub nose. This Kurt Metzger and not give a fuck mode. Because I can't get right. Because I can't get right. Yeah. You're listening to Can't Get Right.
Hey, this is Can't Get Right with me, Kurt Metzger. I got my glasses on this episode because I think I scratched my cornea. So they are too small for my head if you're watching. And the show's called Can't Get Right, not Nailed It. So why don't you leave me alone? I got a good guest today from Mintpress. In fact, if you watch Jimmy Dore's show, we were talking about his story about my old boss, Sacha Baron Cohen. There's Alan MacLeod. Is it MacLeod?
That's right.
Oh, okay. It's not MacLeod, if that's what you thought, people watching us. It's MacLeod, like the Highlander. And so Alan, I asked Aaron Mate to introduce me to, because I was curious about that article, because, I used to work for him, and I wanted to know more about how you got into it. So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And, so we did a thing about it on Jimmy Dore. I don't know if you saw it, with John Kiriakou, that's CIA guy, who this is wild to me that I never heard this story at the time because it was such a big thing, but I guess he's the one at the CIA who revealed waterboarding was going on, right?
That's right, yeah.
And then
he actually went to prison, right?
For 6 years. He went to prison for 6 years, which if I think about the amount of like liberal, like this is terrible at the time that I heard about it. I never heard the guy's name. I never heard like, this guy's doing 6 years for telling us about this thing that we should know about. I remember people being like, I remember a lot of conversations of like, well, if you know a bomb's about to explode and you got a 24, like the hit film 24, torture the bad terrorists to save your loved ones, are you not going to do it? And that was all I heard at like those debates, and nothing about how we knew. I want to get him on too to find out how that played out, because it's not just Snowden and Chelsea Manning and these other people. There's more. I keep learning about them from doing Jimmy Dore's show, but there's more people that come out. You don't hear that, like nobody talks about him. It won't even come up like Assange, I think, in the future. Anyway, John Kiriakou, we talked about your article, and so I want to ask you about it. Like the title of the article was Sacha Baron Cohen is closer to power than he. I should probably have Mike put it up.
Closer scrutiny reveals how close to state power Sacha Baron Cohen really is, and it's at mintpressnews.com.
Right, and so the thing that I was confused about was like, when I worked for him, I just assumed he was close to state power because he's an old money Oxford kid. He came off to me like a guy who was his brothers probably all did something, more of note, and he did comedy because he's a funny dude, and there was always like a sense, like now he's, I don't know, I keep seeing him going through his Jonah Hill serious period, I call it, and it reminds me of that like weird shame that like certain funny people feel that they do comedy when the world, I don't know what it is. There's a thing where people get successful or from their comedy and then they're like ashamed of it or anything. I brought up the example of the old Gong Show when Chuck Barris, I think the guy's name was, wrote a memoir that he was a CIA hitman because everybody trashed him so much as that his show was the Gong Show was the end of civilization. So George Clooney, hitman. I don't know why anyone would go to Chuck Barris for it. It seemed like he just was, I can't just be funny. So and I didn't see anything in the article about documents or something like I saw with some other stuff, but I don't know. What did you think the connection was? Because I kind of on Jimmy's show was like, I can't imagine. I don't know. I had a hard time seeing how Sacha would be.
No, I mean, I think to call him to be some sort of like CIA guy, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that a lot of my work focuses on how increasingly pop culture and also social media has been penetrated by the national security state.
Yeah.
I think what got me interested in Sacha Baron Cohen specifically was I was listening to a couple of people talk on a podcast. One of them was Sina Ramini, who I quoted in the article. And they said that there's a famous clip of him on one of these big late night shows where he just casually says, oh yeah, we were trying to get this scene done, so I called in my CIA contacts, and I was like, what the fuck? You can't just say that and then just like move on like that's something totally normal. So
And
I
there
started
was no
looking into
follow-up
that.
question or anything, or do you think someone
No,
took that as
no.
a joke? You know, like I'm sure he did call
I
a
don't.
CIA contact, but that I'm sure someone
No,
was
no,
like,
it wasn't pitched as a joke at all. It was just like, this is what we do. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how interwoven into pop culture both the Department of Defense, the FBI, and the CIA are. So,
mm-hmm,
just for instance, two researchers, Matthew Alford and Tom Secker, in their book National Security Cinema, they've
mm-hmm.
been filing FOIAs for years and years, these two English researchers, to the CIA, to the Department of Defense. And what they found was the Department of Defense alone, from the documents that they've been given, have been involved in the production of over 800 Hollywood movies and more than 1,100 TV shows. A lot of them are military based, but a lot of them are pop culture, and you don't even realize even things like Ellen or The Price is Right.
Elliot? Oh, wait. The
Well,
Price is Right.
generally what happens is it's a lot more, you'll see military members in full gear on the program, and it's kind of like, oh, thank you for your service. It's kind of very soft, kind of insertion of pro-military propaganda. Sometimes, some of
Wow.
the documents say things like, well, we will put military members in combat fatigues in very important positions in the crowd so people notice them. And I'm sure if you're a sports fan, you've turned on an NFL game and seen like a whole week of salute to service, or it happens
Yeah.
in the NHL as well. So these sorts of things happen all the time, and we don't really think of them as propaganda. And we also don't
Right.
think like this is actually taxpayer funded. So in fact, what's happening is that all Americans are, paying to be bombarded with this sort of pro-war propaganda all the time. And so that's kind of
Yeah.
like one reason that I was interested, just because Sacha Baron Cohen kind of casually put this out there. You
Yeah.
mentioned 24, of course. The CIA has been involved in that as well.
Right.
They work very closely with the writers. The writers of 24 bounce ideas off of them. Same with Homeland as well. They bounce ideas off of national security state members, and then they come back and say, this is how we do it. And then they suggest plot lines or whatever. And actually, research has been found that shows that once people see images of torture in shows like 24, they are much more likely to support torture being used on non-Americans in these situations, like in Abu Ghraib or in Guantanamo Bay, because
right.
it's kind of been sent to them as this idea that torture works, when in fact it totally doesn't. Anyway,
right.
What I was going to say is, I looked up this master list of 800 movies, and I thought, I'm sure a Sacha Baron Cohen movie has been on there if he's talking so casually about working
Right.
with the CIA. And the Department of Defense list did show Bruno on there, and that was my into looking at that entire world.
Yeah. Right. I would have thought it was the Dictator would be the one that was, because that one was I know the two writers that work with him who were hysterical, and like, so that has funny lines there, and there's parts where I'm like, oh, this is so weird. Like there's a part in the Dictator. This is before I worked with him. I saw it, and I was like, that's a weird part. But it was him and Mantzoukas. I can't remember his first name. He's in a bunch of things, and he's like the sidekick to the Dictator, right? And they're talking about the missile they're going to shoot at Israel. And he's like saying it's got to be like round instead of pointy. It's like this comical argument. But he kept coming up like, "Oh, don't worry, we won't blow up Israel." He. And I was like, "Oh, what a strange like thing to keep putting out." Like where I'm like, "What? I don't understand." So having met him, he's like that, where he has I don't think he reads a lot of stuff, even though he's a smart guy. I think he knows a lot of people. Like saying my CIA contact, I think he has contacts like that are like, it's kind of like a little bit adding gravitas or something, like I got the impression he's the one that became a clown out of his family. The reason I got along with them so well was they were like wise ass, like, they probably should have used their intellects to do something more something for society, but they chose to make jerk off comedy, which is something I like a lot. It reminds me of like Mel Brooks or something, which is like my that's why he's a Tom. He had like a very Mel Brooks sensibility, but that's almost lowbrow. for somebody who's like a highborn, you know, like, and there's this like shame attached to it. So he would always have these things. We got in an argument. I saw this on Jimmy's show about Antifa, which this is before you just heard them all the goddamn time. Like, and he had this whole thing about like, it's just lesbians marching. And I know somebody that got punched by them for videotaping, you know, like, I'm like, no, it's not a, he had a whole thing of like, what's wrong with punching Nazis? And so I'm like, well, one, if Nazis are a problem, we're going to have to probably shoot them. I don't think punching is going to defeat the Nazis. And then two, they just hit anybody and call them a Nazi afterwards, so they don't really identify them right. It's like Portland's a silly place. So he had made me leave the room. I had to leave the room over it. It wasn't anything like where we weren't like cool afterwards, but if he feels strongly, he's going for it. He don't care. And that dictator thing, like when I think about it, like sounds so much like it. That, yeah, we're putting this thing about Israel in, you know. So, but I imagine a lot of things he would think strongly coincide with. Like it would be like you just be at a party with important people, and then if you think about like when Julia Childs or Gloria Steinem were like doing CIA stuff, it turns out, you know, like I don't think they even need to clue the celebrity, and I think they can just tell one celeb and then they just spread it around to the others at a party. And a lot of people are almost trained after all this time of doing what you were talking about. A bunch of people are just trained to think that way anyway. So I think they probably have to do very little extra, you know, to like it's almost like self-replicating kind of propaganda machines that we have now. I've noticed that a lot with like a lot of Hollywood people. But
oh, sure.
Yeah. Do you like the thing about The Price is Right? And that subtle thing is, I don't think I might have heard that, but I wasn't really like aware of it. Like that's the thing that's so creepy. Is like, why would you be on Ellen or there's something gross? Is that part of that act that legalized, you know, propaganda towards towards American citizens? I can't remember the name of it. The act.
What, the NDAA? Do you mean?
Yeah, is the NDAA? Because you know I was looking it up after we had talked about it on Jim's show, and it just had the whole baseball story. It's like, it's not anything. It's just so they can play the baseball games to Cuba. And that's what John Kirikou mentioned. And the thing that's funny is I kind of remember hearing a mutated version of that NDAA. And when I first met Sasha, talking to him about it, and I don't remember, I think I said something, what I've been told is Obama signed something that's going to do something with free speech in some way. I remember I put it, and Sasha's like, no, that's misinformation. So he must have been talking about it's just baseball to Cubans, and I don't know. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, the crux of it was that it came up in the 2000s. Probably a lot of people are aware that the United States government spends a lot of money beaming radio waves and TV stations into Cuba. Basically, you know, a lot of it's kind of very soft, but a lot of it's kind of hard. And the whole point of it is to try and undermine the Cuban government. But the problem is that these radio stations are all built in South Florida. And that means that pretty much anyone in Southern Florida can pick up these government-sponsored propaganda shows. And that really, you know, set up a legal problem where, you know, this is propaganda. This is meant to, you know, overthrow the government, and it is government-sponsored. And that is not allowed under American law. And so they had to kind of change the law to get around this. And as you said, like, you know, some people were like, no, it's no big deal. But what it actually means is that now that the American public are now completely fair game for, you know, psychological operations done by the government. And if history is anything to go by with, you know, things like, you know, the head of the NSA saying stuff like, we are absolutely not wiretapping Americans. We are not spying on anybody. We're not collecting data. And then Edward Snowden's revelations come out and blow that entire narrative out of the water. It seems pretty likely that, you know, this could be being used for just this sort of action.
Well, I think now there's an interesting thing happening because it's so grotesque that, you know, it's easy to look at Ukraine, the spoiling for a war that, and on these are like the leftist channels here. The news channels are like, Jimmy played the thing of Jim Acosta. Now I know he's a human blank, but Jesus Christ. He's calling Tucker Carlson a Bolshevik and a communist for asking questions that I wanted an answer to, like, you know, why are you doing this? What do we? What is it we're getting out of creating World War III? Just basic shit. And instead of answering the questions, I hear how he's one of the bad people. I still want to know the answer to the question, even if I, you know, didn't care for his bow tie wearing and other stupid things about him. And then to say like Fox News are communists. That's why back when Obama was in, I just thought of him as a guy doing the best he could, you know, because they're calling him a communist and a Muslim. So, you know, what do you want? What's the president supposed to do? Like, watching that game switch to the other side is so it makes you open to the idea of anything like this. Yeah, like none of that is hard to believe now about the NSA or what that act really is, because people can see it now. They're getting like upset by it, which I think is kind of good, because traditionally the Republicans were the 24 is great crowd. Did they play that in UK 24?
Yo, yeah, for sure. We get all of your crap just beamed in constantly.
Yeah,
and now with Netflix and things, that you can find anything.
Well, yeah, and they when I remember Dana, you know, his comic Dana Gould. He wrote for The Simpsons for a little while.
Okay.
When it was still good, and he I saw him talk about it on Bill Maher years ago. I don't even think it was on the HBO show. I think it was before but he was talking about that torture thing of, you know, would you do this if a bomb, all these stupid hypothetical they would say to justify a thing that's straight up illegal. And he's like, listen, guys, if we need to torture someone, of course we're going to torture. Like, but these ghouls want to make it a law that it's okay to torture. Which I was like, what do you think? The United States wasn't going to torture until they made it legal? The reason it's illegal is to hopefully minimize the amount of torture they're definitely going to do. And I think a bunch of people are like, yeah, no, it's good. They should do that.
Yeah, man, exactly. It's like when you look at the sort of, you know, crap that comes out about, you know, Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib inmates. Most of these people are like 14-year-olds who are in the wrong place at the wrong time, or somebody who had the same name as like a wanted guy. And because the US government or the military doesn't want to accept that they, you know, did something wrong, they just kind of have to keep these people in these camps pretty much indefinitely. And so, you know, when you actually look down on it, it's really unclear whether torture even helps any of these things. And, you know, frankly, the US should have better intelligence anyway than to, you know, rely on some guy they picked up that probably doesn't know anything and will probably say anything to get, you know, just out of the situation, or, you know, denounce anyone or say he was
right.
It's just, you know, once you've got that signed thing saying that I was a terrorist, pretty much, you know, you can throw the rule book out.
Yeah, I mean, I know at the time I didn't think about. I was in New York when that happened. I was supposed to start a new job where I would, you know, I was doing stand up, and a lot of comics would work in these, like, stand in the street bothering people to try to sell them like spa treatments or comedy tickets to clubs. Like that was a common, and I'm not good at that. I shouldn't. I just needed money, and I was about to go in to start this job, standing outside of like around Columbia. You're supposed to go like, "Hey, pretty girl, do you want a spa treatment?" And you're supposed like basically just harass people. That's a sales technique. And so I wake up, and then one of them had already been hit, the towers. So we lived in Greenpoint across the Hudson, so you can stay on the roof and see.
Oh, you can see it, right? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. And then so we went up to look, and then all of a sudden the other one hit. I have a photo from back then, too. I got it. My ex-girlfriend sent it to me. I got to dig it out because it's really wild to think about. Like, I'm standing right by it. And the way things were after that was, well, one, it smelled like bodies, which I didn't know that's what, like, burned bodies smell like, but that's what that smelled. There was, like, a burned body smell in the city for, like, 3 months. Wow. And it was very... I mean, it was crazy. Like, I remember that's the only time I didn't, like, right after it happened, I didn't feel like doing comedy because I'm like, oh, this is like a weird time. And then we had a blackout not long after. There was a blackout, and New York's notorious for bad things happening. But during the blackout, it was in the summer, everybody just kind of like hung out and partied peacefully because it was so traumatic, the thing, that none of the bullshit you would hear about normally happened at this blackout. It was actually like great. It was like a great time. It was probably the best time I ever had with this, the blackout that happened after that in New York. And I didn't have, like, I tried, because by the way, I was raised not to be into war or anything. We Jehovah's Witnesses couldn't vote, we get involved. They thought it was 100% against God to be nationalistic or patriotic, because God doesn't, like any country. Like, he likes America, but he doesn't like America. He's going to destroy all of it. I was raised with that. So I didn't have, but I felt like a thing of like, well, we got all this stuff to blow stuff up. Like, somebody should blow up for this, Everybody had like a feeling like that. And even up to going into Iraq, the logic made sense to me, I guess. I don't know. Looking back now, I had a buddy, Lee Camp, that I think he's on RT now. To his credit, he's pretty consistent with his shit the whole time, that this was a mistake. And looking back now, he was right. But I remember I was like, that's some, America's not the worst out of all of them. And like, they don't get to come do, and we should, all kinds of those, like, I don't know, I would call them ape-like feelings we all felt. And I still remember doing a show. I used to do they called the Chitlin Circus, all like black shows, because you could make better money on the weekends doing these shows than you could in like the whiter rooms. And I was doing a show with in Pennsylvania, and so it was an all black show. There's like a few white people here and there, and one Iraqi guy that worked in the back. I don't know if he was like a bartender or he was like a server in the green room. And I still remember this because he was talking about how crazy it was they were going into Iraq. He goes, no, they cannot do this because it is. And I remember, like, by the way, most of the black people were like, oh no, we're going to blow that. It was like a united racial thing about, we're going to go blow up Iraq and it's coming. It wasn't like white versus black. And I just remember this lone Iraqi guy trying to convince, and in my head, I'm thinking, like, let's say he convinces all of them. What good's that going to do? I mean, why even bother saying anything, dude? And I think, like, that must have been such a bad idea that this guy, there was nothing he could do but tell a bunch of, like, black people who don't give a shit about it in the back of a club, because he's got to tell, like, that haunts me to think about it, how upset this guy was. And everybody I know from Iraq, who's not Muslim, by the way, that's Assyrian, like Chaldean Christians, the supposedly Christian force that we sent in there, destroyed the lives of any Christian who's from Iraq. Nobody wanted it, and I didn't even think about it until I don't know, we're going like around the time Trump got in. I just remember I forgot if we were still there, and I had to Google it. I was like, are we still in Iraq? And I had to Google it. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, how did I just forget if we had a war? Like, so then that's when it dawned on me something's wrong with how all the media is, because everything was about, I don't know, coming after comedians, I guess, which seemed odd to me. Do you notice this stuff now, like with Joe Rogan and now Dave Chappelle? Did you see that? They're trying to say Dave Chappelle stopped affordable housing in his hometown.
What?
In Ohio. Yeah.
What's he doing?
Well, it turns out the term affordable housing is some bullshit to get a tax write-off. It's some tacky developer wants to build, massive unaffordable housing on like 56 acres of land. And then they've set aside 1.7 acres or something for a future. There's no plans to make the affordable housing, but they're like, yeah, we'll put this in down the road. We'll figure it out later. So the whole media reports that is he's against affordable housing. What's the difference between that and marketing? That's what I asked John Kirikou, because the thing of just placing a soldier on Ellen, that just sounds like marketing. Do you know what I mean? But marketing, I guess, is just propaganda. Like, what's the difference?
I guess, if you're doing all of this, trying to like get into people's brains, if you're like Tropicana or Minute Maid to try and sell them OJ, it can be, there are downsides to it, but it's not life or death. But when you're talking about the military, we're literally talking about wars right now. Suddenly the media wants us to have World War III with Russia. These are literally life and death issues. Yeah. And, as you said, you weren't even thinking about Iraq, but people in the Middle East, like I've been to the Middle East and I've seen the devastation. I've seen hundreds of thousands of people living in refugee camps, like they know what it's like. And, ultimately, even if you're kind of insulated from it, when we're talking about the military, this is really a serious problem, because this is talking about the sovereignty of countries. This is talking about the fundamental way in which our societies are run, what sort of super important decisions there are. So while it is marketing from a military point of view, it's a life and death issue.
I know, that's the creepiest part of it. You ever see the Raytheon ads for now they're helping young girls for tech something of the future
Oh,
tech.
sure. Yeah, they sponsor Girl Scouts of America, don't they? You know,
Yeah,
they've got all these workshops about, getting women into tech, and you have a look at all of these Forbes top 100 businesses for women. It's incredible how the military industrial complex is totally woke in that sense that they will absolutely love to have
yeah,
50% women and give them, maternity leave or something. But it's all in the pursuit of like making weapons to like blow, Yemeni kids on a school bus to complete smithereens. And so there's just this complete, disjuncture here. Do you remember the one about the woke CIA ads?
yeah.
Um,
Right. The
I
Latina acts
actually,
of color.
yeah, I think I was the one that found them and popularized them. I found them.
Oh, is
I
that
was on the
right?
CIA. Yeah, I was on the CIA website, and I was looking up some stuff. I can't remember what it was, and they had this ad at the bottom, and I played it, and it was an unlisted YouTube playlist from the CIA, which you couldn't get access to unless you clicked the link from the CIA website. And I kind of made a collage of them, and I was like, and I shared it, thinking, isn't this crazy that one of the worst, most violent one of those violent organizations in the world that's responsible for coups and wars and everything is using this progressive language and pretending
Mm-hmm.
to be like on the side of feminism. But actually, people like Donald Trump Jr. were retweeting me, and they kind of understood the message to be actually the CIA are radical Antifa Marxists and want to destroy the family unit and all of that.
Yeah,
So it's a
right.
really so it kind of like people are attacking it from different sides and seeing like
Yeah,
hypocrisies in
right.
different ways, and it's pretty interesting to see that play out in real time.
Well, because I don't know. I have a bunch of friends that just make things criticizing stupid, like Disney Star Wars and shit. But
Yeah.
the weird propaganda things. Okay, do you remember this when they were dropping? Marvel Comics was working with like Obama to make a Spider-Man who was Arab to drop on as like, I guess, propaganda. I can't remember if it was
Oh, I
Afghanistan
don't
or
remember
Iraq.
that. No.
Yeah, and I was like, and that's not. I'm sure that's what they did back with like Captain America and shit back in the day. He was punching out Hitler in the comics and like so that's not unusual. But the thing that's bizarre is, then Marvel Comics got this chick Sana Amanat became the just installed as the chief diversity officer at Marvel Comics, and her family's connected to Huma Abedin, the Mark Weiner's wife that was Hillary Clinton's assistant. So it's like some DNC thing where they installed this person, and the, her brother's some like money man in Hollywood that was a scam artist. They're like a well-connected, I think, Pakistani family here politically. So Disney put her because Disney owns all the imaginations and stuff now. So they installed this thing in, and so then the reason I made friends with this guy is I used to want to be a comic book artist when I was like young. I went to art school and all that, and I don't read any of that shit now. But I was bored watching YouTube, and this guy would review their new comics. They're so insane that they look like the way I describe it is, if I was like I don't know an Afghan tribesman that found a copy of Afghan Spider-Man, and I'm like, why would you think this would appeal to me? And what is this like? I mean, I know I'm a Afghan tribesman, but I could see when some person who doesn't speak my language made a clumsy attempt to make me feel a certain way. Like, that's what. But that's for Americans. They started making, I don't even. I hate the word woke. It's so stupid. But that's what they did. They started installing this bizarre shit into all the comics, and with like a purpose of all your like icons that you're into need to be reworked to a certain thing. Now, a while back in the day when I was getting attacked nonstop as a low level comedian, I assumed it was the left. It was just leftist horseshit coming at me all the time. My friend Barry Crimmins, who's like a great guy, who was like very leftist. He's got a documentary called "Call Me Lucky." He actually went to Nicaragua during the Iran Contra thing, and like he was a very leftist guy. I love that guy. He was a funny comic. He wasn't authoritarian nonsense. I didn't even know that was a thing, honestly, before I met him. And now it seems to me like a lot of people are starting to notice, even people that are friends of mine that are like conservative, who hate anything left, whatever. They are noticing the corporate. There's something crazy going on where it's beyond. that little puppet show. Now it's completely top bottom, and they're catching on to it. Like with war, like 20 years, we just had this fire festival of a of a war, you know, where all the reports, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And it's a fucking disaster. And it's amazing now to watch these people try to push that again on the same people that had to go fight this stupid war. The last, you know what I mean? Like, we all know people, vets, and their varying degrees of how fucked up they are from like the nightmares they had to watch. And the only thing I don't understand is like, is this just purely media based? Like, there's not a Vietnam. You know, Vietnam, there was like the movie, they always talk about that, the cinema, like, was that 70s kind of pessimistic about shit. And I noticed that never happened during the Iraq war. Like that, everything reflected, no, they're heroes the whole time. And like, what do you not like the military? Whatever the thing is, if you say something about Israel, what do you not like Jews? That was, for all these wars, is what do you not support the military? And now it's, what do you don't like the new Star Wars? What are you, a Nazi because you don't like this fucking corporate horse shit that we just made? And I think it's been overused. So, you know, I don't know. Do you get a sense that like a bunch of people are kind of waking up to it, or do you think it's like it'll?
You know, the interesting thing about all of this from afar is that absolutely nobody has been asking for it. You know, something like, you know, tens of millions of Americans marched against police brutality in 2020. You know, talking about how we have to, you know, do this, do that, retraining the police, defund it. What do we want? Well, we'll work it out. But then corporate America came back and said, right, we're gonna like stop putting Aunt Jemima on like pancake syrup. And the mayor of Washington was like, we're gonna, you know, spend $50 on yellow paint and write Black Lives Matter on the street. All the while, we're going to increase the police budgets and, you know, do all of this stuff. Yeah. Ultimately, this sort of corporate sensitivity training and stuff, I'm reminded of what Malcolm X said. I'll paraphrase him. He said something like, you know, the elites will, you know, placate us with these completely symbolic gestures while continuing to hold all the levers of power. Because ultimately, like, you know, it's kind of the fundamental bankruptcy of modern liberalism when they say something, when, you know, you tell them that 8 people in the world have as much wealth as the bottom 50% combined. And they say 8 men have it. That's terrible. It should be 4 men and 4 women. And that's and it's like, no, the problem is the massive inequality in the first place. Is that, it probably would be better if 4 women had as much wealth, but I think that's such a sideshow that, you know. Well,
everybody is like I mean, it's like emotional programming to me. Like that thing just sounds a funny way to put it, because I always, when I started notice this nonsense about in movies, like representation, like that the guy looks like I'm a kid in underoos, and I'm he looks like me, so that's me doing. I don't enjoy a story that way, where I watched 3 white people today and I watched 2 black people. People want to see a story, but I think that's part of the. And I don't understand. I don't know that there's any overall thing, but the marketing is to get you to say, oh, this reflects me, this person, you know, and then it's like, it's good for you. Like, oh, this person who's, by the way, doesn't resemble me. We have some arbitrary skin pigment thing that loosely relates. They're doing great, so I'm doing great. And then that way it's like this overall thing to sell everybody on. Only a few people are going to be okay, like living right, but you can take solace in knowing that. It just, like, I don't know how people glom onto that so easily, other than because I have a steady diet of that crap, you know, in me it's not. I still didn't get it, and I think they overestimate how stupid people are quite a lot.
You know, when you were talking about making Spider-Man for Afghans, I was reminded of when I was talking with a State Department employee who spent a lot of time in Afghanistan. He was talking about how they were talking to these Afghans in like a tiny village, and they were talking about 9/11, and the Afghans were like, what is that? And they were showing them on their phones pictures of the Twin Towers coming down. And the Afghans were like, what is that? We don't know where it is. Where is this? And they're like, it's in New York. And they're like, I don't know where New York is, man. Like, they have so little concept of like why this war is going on, and yet their lives are completely dominated by it in such just an incredible way.
Well, they're the stone. Remember, they're like, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age, and like they're already in the Stone Age, so we're going to go and that casual thing. Of it's really something to me when I think about it now, which is because by the way, I can't stand any term with the word phobia in it. A phobia is a mental disorder, which is an illness, so that's like, it's weird that can be used as a cheap insult or something now, but there's definitely a massive ignorance of like when people talk about Islam and like, smear Obama that he's a Muslim, and that implies, when I heard that, I'd be like, President Droney is a Muslim to you, the guy that, how many does he need to kill for you to feel like he's not a good Muslim? And because I never, like I said, I grew up in that kind of doomsday cult where we were the only real Christians. It says there's only going to be this many who do it right and everybody else is fake. So the idea that this religion's connected to our government in any way or blessed was stupid to me, and but not to a lot of people. They really, really believe that stuff. And I had an idea. This is the thing I definitely thought was, okay, it's like I didn't think they hate us for our freedoms, but the clash of, East and West culture and all that shit. And that's where you get a lot of people. That's why, like, when Gavin made the Proud Boys as at first a joke organization that just got a life of its own. It wasn't anything about white supremacy, but it was Western chauvinism. That was the term they would use, which is like Western culture's we're in a culture war with the world, and Western culture is the better one. And I always thought I would be like, like all the things you hate are coming out of Western culture. They're not coming out, like if you're Christian, you're doing, they believe the same thing as you pretty much with different names. Like that's not an alien culture. Like that's your own shit. The Abraham books, and it's this weird disconnect. And even now there's a thing about, well, I guess now both parties really say foreigners are trying to change our minds, but even now, like, it's like the calls coming from inside the house. That saying is if you don't like the propaganda or whatever the thing is, it's coming from us, from the superior Western culture. So how fucking superior could it be? Do you think? How much of it do you? Because were you pretty left, right? Like, what's your?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't love labels, but if people were going to call me like socialist or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, because people like, oh, I can't listen. I have no connections to. I'm like non-binary, so I don't want to hear that I'm not supposed to hear from somebody because of the, the box that's what those are for. So that somebody can be like, I've already dismissed you.
Yeah, exactly. They pigeonhole you, and you don't really want to be a pigeon, so don't let yourself be pigeonholed, I always say. So I kind of try and talk in language that's less, ideological, or I don't try not to use too much jargon.
Yeah, well, it's the same as, I don't even know what chauvinism technically means, but I feel like it's that. Like, talking in ideological language, and we use a framework of something here. And then, do you, Yemen's a good example. What exactly is going on with Yemen as you know it, and then what would you say people? Because I think most people don't really know that much about it, and if they do, they're like, I don't know. I bet they know it's not even a counter narrative because you never hear it brought up by anybody. But what is going on in Yemen, just so people?
Well, you're totally right that there's a reason why people don't know it, and that's because nobody in the media is talking about it. I mean, MSNBC went on a whole year without even mentioning it on their network. What's going on there is since 2014, kind of coming out of the Arab Spring, there's been a revolution that overthrew the Yemeni government, who was backed by Saudi Arabia. And since then, the Saudi-led coalition has been fighting this brutal war against these Houthi militias. Mm-hmm. And something like 200,000 people have been killed in this. The United Nations calls it the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Around 20 million people, according to the UN, lack either potable water or enough food or basic medicine. So there are all sorts of terrible pandemics of things like cholera and, people dying of these 18th, 19th century diseases going on. And although it's called a civil war, it's really kind of this proxy war between all these sorts of different groups in the region, primarily Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar, who are just bombing the country into smithereens. And the only reason they're able to do that is that Western governments are selling them weapons all the time. So, like, I did a study of the US, for instance, and found that it had sold since the beginning of the war an absolute minimum of $28.3 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia. And that could be the highest number would probably be around twice that. So it's an absolutely enormous figure that the US is actually profiting from it. And if you take the amount of Yemenis who've died, it means that pretty much $50,000 has been made per death from companies like Boeing or Raytheon or Lockheed Martin. So
Wow.
this is really the worst thing that's going on in the world right now, currently, in terms of fighting. And Western countries like the UK and United States are absolutely knee deep in this. But because body bags aren't coming home, and because we're not seeing buildings being exploded nightly on our news, we just kind of forget about it. We don't know what's going on.
It's amazing to me. It's like a feeling of leaving the stove on and forgetting about it. Like, did I leave? Like, that's what I had when I had to Google Iraq. Is like, did I leave something on? And like, now it's not. It's so crazy to me now that something that big, because I didn't know that that's like a UN declaration. That's like the worst. I didn't know they have like the list of the worst thing happening right now. But I mean, I can remember when Rwanda happened and we all heard about that. Is it coincidentally? Do you know about Rwanda? Like any like details? I vaguely remember hearing something years later, but I don't know how true it is. But I guess that the Hutu and Tutsi thing started the violence because the president got blown up by like an RPG in his plane or something, right? Like they thought the Tutsis did it. And for years it was like they didn't do it. It was probably they faked it. But then it turns out that they did do it, the Tutsis. And Clinton kind of implied they should like go for it and we'd back them up or something. Is that remotely true?
Until you said Clinton backed them up, I was like, yep, this all sounds correct. I can't remember especially about what Clinton's role was in it, but I do know the administration was constantly blocking the United Nations from really getting involved and sending peacekeepers there for ages and ages. And so there was this talk about, something needs to be done. But in fact, the Clinton administration was actually stopping troops being sent in. I think there was a Canadian general who was like begging the UN for permission to actually like move out. But Washington just kept blocking it. But yeah, ultimately that was a kind of a bloodbath where the US more or less had one group in mind, but they weren't really like super into it. Whereas, with Yemen, they're absolutely on one belligerent side. And so, when hundreds of thousands of people die, they really don't want their citizens knowing about it.
Why do they care so much of Yemen? I mean, what is in Yemen where this is the interest of 3 different Arab countries?
Yeah.
Where...
I mean, in terms of actual resources, Yemen's pretty resource poor. It doesn't have a great deal of oil in comparison to the rest of the Middle East. But the group that is leading the rebellion, the Houthis, they're very close to Iran, or at least they share the same religion, the Shia religion, not the Sunni sect of Islam. If you have a look on a map, Yemen is very strategically located. It's on the Red Sea.
Okay.
If you remember, just have a look on the map, and just above the Red Sea is the Suez Canal. I'm sure everybody remembers last year when one ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. International business just freaked out and the entire economy blew up. And so pretty much every ship that goes from Asia to Europe or vice versa has to go past Yemen. And so in that sense, it is very strategically located in the sense that, if a government came by and wanted to stop world trade, they could do it, like that.
Do you think like just to be a leader of a country, there's like a built-in like kind of psychopath aspect where you have to reduce a bunch of people to numbers all the time, and like so a bunch of people, and like maybe you're not even like that, but if you're in that position where you're like, well, I got like like a president could become the same as a soldier, I think, of like, well, I'm a killer now and I have to do this. Like, I don't even know how you would have, and like I was raised to believe it's impossible. Not that I think necessarily it is now, but how do you even have leaders that don't Because the thing I find unifying about all these, every goddamn political system or ideology is they all basically have their base principle is, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. And then it's how many and which eggs do you break. And that's it. And there's never a thing of like, maybe there's not an omelet coming. That's never acknowledged. And people just like, I've heard it just repeated in different ways over and over again. I think that's how people feel about whatever they're doing now that they don't even know the half of. They're like, well, we got to have peace in the world and make the world safe for democracy.
Yeah, I mean, there's this concept in business called the Peter principle, where everybody rises to the level of their incompetence. So, you do a good job at one level, you get promoted, and you get to a system where you just become incompetent, and then it's like you're not getting promoted after that. There's a great State Department employee who ended up being a big critic of the US called William Bloom, and he wrote a book where he talked about this kind of a Peter principle in the CIA, where like you can get an entry-level job and be a nice person, but the minute they start talking about doing these things, if you start raising questions like, is this really ethical? They're like, well, why don't you go in that room over there? And it's like when promotion comes up, there's no chance you're getting, promoted. And so if you want to move up in politics or in these organizations or the military, you have to be willing to sign on the thing and order the coup, order, the bombings, etc. And the people who are most sadistic and sociopathic, they're the ones who rise to the top, baby. And they're the ones who are totally willing to just press one button and end a country completely. And that's really what's going on in this. If you talk to people who are ex-military, a lot of them would agree as well that the most savage people are not the privates who, maybe do terrible things to civilians. It's the ones at the top who are just ordering bombings that they know will cause thousands of people dying. That's, that's the real, that's the real thing about our system, where we've kind of designed, a way of letting the most violent and sadistic people rise to the top, and that's a real problem.
I mean, how do you even? That's the other thing is I don't know. That's why I don't have an ideology where I'm like, I just want to know what you do. I don't want to hear I don't want to hear more fucking messaging. I just want to know the actual things people fucking did, and I've already have a proven track record of excusing all kinds of terrible things that we were doing. So it ain't like I'm going to be, but you're not even going to have the right to even think about it. It's like, this is too important. That is this theme of this is too important for you to know anything about it. You're an idiot. Don't do your own research. That's one of the things. That's what a stupid person would do. This is, by the way, in LA where I am, that's a common, and it's always comics that have TV deals or something. They all have the thing of I don't even think about it. Just do the thing they said. That thing you described about the military is also at NBC.
Oh, most definitely. It's the same in media as well. If you start, working in a way which doesn't please your editor, if you want to get involved in journalism, you got to work a lot of, months at least, maybe working for free in London or Washington or New York. And already that's pretty much, knocked out 90% of the population who can't afford to do that. And then even then you're working on a 0 hours contract. You don't have any sort of benefits or anything. You can be fired immediately. So you're not rocking the boat. So when your editor says, write something like this, you're going to do it. You're not going to raise questions. And, ultimately, you're not going to get your contract renewed if you start, putting in work that your supervisors and superiors don't like, and certainly not if the bosses don't like. And so we ultimately have created the system which kind of selects for obedience and people who just basically don't think. So we've got all these totally mediocre people in journalism, and I'm sure maybe you disagree, but a lot of people in the highest echelons of comedy and on TV and such, they seem not to have any sort of real, independent ideas or a real sort of something that's a bit different or avant-garde. It's just, total boring bullshit that we've all seen for years.
It's all my internet was unstable. It's all, a friend of mine said every gig's a corporate gig now. So when I started comedy and here's why they paid great. I did not do a lot of them, okay, because I'm not even particularly filthy. It's just like like my thoughts are dirty or something. Like it's not that it's not clean, but I'll be so. We're doing. I was with David Tell, and we're doing this corporate. I can't remember where it was. It was a mid-sized like theater, packed. We both go on, and like there's like no laughs on almost anything, and you know I bombed a lot. I assume they would at least like it Tell because he was headlining. Okay, froze for a while. I was saying. I assume they like it Tell, but he also bombed. After the show, they're all coming up to us. This corporate, I don't know what, it's different companies. They're like, oh my god, that was so funny. And we're like, what? And like, oh yeah, well I didn't want to laugh because my client's sitting next to me. Like they all had some foreign client they had sitting, and they couldn't be seen to laugh like they work for a shogun or something. Like they're like a young Korean girl, and here, cover your face. And I couldn't believe like. I'm like, why would you have a comedy show then? Like inherently, if you can't be seen laughing in front of someone, this is a bad. And then this foreign investor, I don't know what the hell they must think, where they're like, what do you guys do here? So you go to this show that you don't laugh at and bring me, and I'm deeply offended, by the way, at the whole thing. That's like amazing. And I watch that the whole time. I mean, I wrote for a bunch of stuff, man. I will say Sasha's one of the funniest rooms to be in of being making up stupid shit to film, and it was actually one of the least like corporate. That's because he had his two buddies from Oxford, and then they hired me, which he didn't do a lot, and that's how they kept out the stuff. And this is 2016. I remember telling them like, you know, you're not going to be allowed to just be the guy doing his thing here for long. Like they're and they keep out because it's their friends. It's almost like a band and not a corporate hiring environment. Because what you just said is right. It's not like stupid people. It's like real mid-level wits. They're people smart enough to not ask annoying questions. Even if it's a vital question, they keep it. To this day, I still think about asking my and he's a good guy too. I like him. Not that he gets it, but Dan, the producer on when I was writing on Amy Schumer's show, and it was Rachel Dolezal was in the news because she was transracial or whatever the fuck, and he was like, oh my god, and I just asked not to be like, wasn't like a guy, like I'm genuinely was trying to understand. I was like, well, just you could be transgender, like why can't race? Because that's like probably less of a real biological thing than, I mean, if you stack them up. And he just goes, Kurt. And that was the answer to my question. Kurt. I thought about it for years. I thought about it for so many years, like what the fuck that meant. You know, like I always said, that was my what is the sound of one hand clapping thing. That I'd be like what? And all it meant was why would you even ask that? You see how we all feel. And then now I always hear like, he made tone deaf. Remember Matt Damon got in trouble for his tone deaf Me Too remarks, which were, there's a different, you know, I think it shouldn't just be one mob. Basically everything he said was right. And they go, his tone deaf, and they say it all the time now. And I don't even know if they think about what that fucking means. That's like, oh, we're all singing the same song. You heard the song we're singing. Why are you singing your own song? And I don't even think people think about that at all. I don't think they focus in on the word choice. I think everything's colloquial. I mean, so me not believing in any of these parties that we have, that's nihilism. People call that nihilism. Like because they're using the Lebowski definition of fucking joke nihilism, and I've never like read anything about what it actually is. So now the language means nothing. It's pretty easy to stretch these things around, you know, like they just can't. It just, we'll get it down to like 5 ways to say good or bad, and limit. I don't know. It sounds like 1984 shit. How did you become a journalist? Did you go to like a good school for, you know, like, or how are you at Mintpress and not at are you not from the right sort of family or something?
No, I totally backed into it in a completely different way. I came from academia. I did a PhD about the media and propaganda, essentially. And I wrote a couple of books afterwards. I was kind of thinking about maybe trying to be a journalism studies or sociology like lecturer or something. But I immediately realized that the academic publishers were just completely uninterested in promoting the book. So I thought I had to do it myself. So I wrote a couple of articles which were basically plugs for the book, and sent them to a couple of outlets that I thought might be interested. And then they did publish it. And then a couple of weeks later, I got like a check for like $500 in the mail, which I was not expecting. I thought I was doing this for free. And so I thought, well, hey, why don't I take a chapter out of this book and send it to them? And then they said, yeah, we'll do this. That was Propaganda in the Information Age, Still Manufacturing Consent. It's basically about, if people know Noam Chomsky, he did a documentary and wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent.
Yeah,
I was kind of like updating it for the social media era. And so like after doing like 3 articles for this website, and they were paying me, I thought, well, I'm actually getting more money from this than I would from, academic publishing, because that's a complete scam.
Yeah.
These guys are just like totally like ripping people off and making huge corporate fees on it.
Consulting.
So, yeah, I exactly. And I've just kind of backed into journalism like that from there. Mintpress contacted me, asked if I wanted to write a couple of articles for them. And now, I'm full time in it. So it's completely different to a lot of people who are like, they've really got their heart set on doing it, and they go to Columbia School of Journalism, and they, do like like an internship at wherever, etc. I was completely the opposite. I've never looked for a career in this. So, I don't know, maybe I'm completely different. I come from a much different class background than most journalists as well. So, yeah.
When did they start shifting where it was a definite, I kind of vaguely have an idea of when, but I'm not really sure of like, oh no, we're not objective and we shouldn't be. That's a myth that you could even attempt to try to be objective. And then I thought there was a term, I want to say it's narrative-driven journalism, but I'm not sure that that's what it is. But there's some kind of term for how they do journalism here now. I think it's all ends up just being PR is what it looks like to me. But back when I was having these like, there was nothing called cancel culture then. It was just called call-out culture. And it was all like, you could tell there was a fresh graduating class of something that was entering into the blogging world, and it was like a full court press on comedians all the time for some reason. It was bizarre. It was like, what is this? And people were saying this nonsense. And then here's how it's different from a cult, because everybody calls, says this stuff's a cult. I was in a cult, and we were glad to tell you what we thought. And we didn't go, I don't have time to educate you. You should have already known that. Like, you should have shown up knowing these things that I went 80 grand in debt to learn. And it was such a bizarre thing, and it seemed to radiate out of like, I don't know, kind of like Portland, and remember the time Portlandia came on before they had to airlift Fred and Carrie out, like the fall of Saigon, when at the end of the series they were like, they're not welcome here. That was like all the media things. And when it first happened, these were like stupid, like bloggy, and it wasn't news. It was just like gossipy nonsense that was like had a political theme. Like how Teen Vogue is like did you know Teen Vogue is a Marxist girl?
Yeah.
Teen Vogue?
They kind of like just like hired some editor, the wrong editor, I guess, and the editor took it in a completely crazy direction.
That's everywhere.
I don't know, it's probably, to be fair though, that's probably a much more interesting magazine than it was for the last 20, 30 years now. Yeah,
well, I mean, could be, because I wouldn't even bring up Teen Vogue ever in a conversation before that.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's got
it would just
something.
be bullshit about, how to style your hair or whatever.
Yeah, it would be suspicious. Like, why do you read Teen Vogue? I had no reason. It's incriminating.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, that is sus if you're picking up Teen Vogue as like a man of a certain age. You're like, what the hell's going on here?
Do you think there's a thing to, everything I watch now has all those, I've heard it, you've heard it, I mean, everybody's heard of them for years, those Davos meetings in Switzerland, where all the rich people. But because I watch so much left versus right stuff, and also unrelated things, and a lot of my friends don't, like my friends that are into just pop culture shit, that's what they're into. And Jimmy is into politics kind of stuff, and he doesn't know about any of this. Like if there's like even Kyle Rittenhouse, which was like a big thing. He didn't know anything about that. Like, what I love about Jimmy is he just is like, he looks at the thing, and then if he thinks he's wrong, he'll change on it. He doesn't do the team player thing. Because when that came out, I have a whole bit about doing my act because it was the most insane, like racially charged, all white incident that's ever happened that I've ever seen. And this is a true story. I had an ex-girlfriend I talked to, and she was like, she's like a definite, like, she must be like a CNN style, like blue, no matter who, whatever, more than when I knew her even. And she was like, yeah, he's going to prison for that was murder. And I go, and I had watched, I don't give a shit about any of the people in it, what their personal feelings. I just watched the footage. There's all this footage of every part of the night. And if you know anything about just the smallest bit about how the law works with self-defense, it satisfied every fucking thing of self-defense. So I knew he was going to get acquitted. Like, it seemed bizarre to me. And I go, look, just watch. I'm not, I don't have any political feelings about this. Just watch the footage. And you see, she goes, I don't need to see the footage. Where I was like, wow, like, I've never heard someone say that. Like, and she's not the only one saying that. And a bunch of people that would talk about it, if you ask if they watch it, they would go, I watched the trial, which means they didn't watch the trial. They saw clips of the trial, you know. And that's a weird thing to me. There's like now Drive where you're like, I better not, like, who printed, was it Max Blumenthal? Something with Hunter Biden, they put this maybe hacked materials on Twitter.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And I'm like, who would go, I'm not going to look at this important person's thing because it might have been from hacked materials, and that's some kind of, is that in the Ten Commandments or something? Where is that morals coming from? Like,
listen, man, yeah. When it's a good thing, they usually call it a leak, but when it's a bad thing, they call it a hack. You know, but the line between hack is pretty diaphanous. It's pretty hard to tell which is which. It's the lifeblood of journalism. If you just say, "Oh, you can't have this because you know this company objects" or whatever, you know, how are you ever going to find out about, you know, Amazon doing shit to their, you know, employees and, you know, making them pee in bottles or whatever? That all comes out because of leaked documents, you know. So it is kind of interesting when the state gets involved and is like, this is hacked, don't look at this. That completely blew up in their face, though, because it turned into a huge meme. And it was I think it's the number one most viewed page on the Grey Zone since then.
Yeah, well, I hope that, because my friend Kyle Dunnigan, we do a bunch of sketch stuff, and he does my only favorite, the only Biden that anybody does that's good to me. Like, I've never seen a good Biden on anything. And you're kind of not supposed to make fun of him. Like, I don't know how people, I mean, he's really comedically is like a blessing if you were doing impressions. Have you ever seen how SNL does Biden?
No. Oh my God. Yeah. I have not tuned into SNL.
Are we allowed, we can't show how SNL does Biden, right, Mike? Or can I show him and then we just can't put it on the
show
YouTube?
An image? Yeah. If you start playing it, then you get a strike.
Can you show an image and play like how the impression sounds?
Yeah, the audio's fine. The video is what would get us in trouble.
Oh, can we do that? And also,
I'll play the whole thing or whatever, and I'll put a still image over it.
Oh, great. Okay. Because I want to show you what they do, and you tell me what the fuck this is, and then I'm gonna get and then you know the one out here. I'm gonna send you right now, Mike, the one me and Kyle did that got the warning. So I posted on my Twitter and got this may be sensitive content warning put on the tweet that I can appeal. And I don't know what the sensitive content is. Like, the things that I would think I've seen tweeted many times. There's nothing I can tell that's sensitive about it other than it's Biden. And the weird thing is Kyle posted the same video and you can't see in the thumbnail that it's Biden, and he didn't get a sensitive content. So there's something like strange. Like, it's just something strange going on. All right, go ahead. If you find that, put it up. I'm put up the Biden thing right now.
From President Joe Biden.
Good evening, hello, my fellow Americans. As I keep saying every chance I get, we're in the middle of a cold, dark winter.
Who is he doing?
Dark Republicans don't think it should vote. You know, this virus has disrupted our lives, it's canceled holidays, weddings, quinceañeras, gender reveal parties. Wildfires that started as gender reveal parties. Whatever the hell is happening with Novak Djokovic. I know you're tired of getting emails from your kid's school late at night saying,
you don't have to play the whole thing, Mike. It's like, so
You really don't.
yeah, like
It's
that's one of the better ones, by the way.
sometimes I watch stuff on SNL and think, who is this for? How is this so popular? Like, who's going through their life and thinking, yes, this is really resonating with me? It's crazy. Well, there must have been some kind of diktat that came down from on high somewhere, because I don't know if you remember, but there was a point in the Democratic primaries where Biden was totally eating shit, and it looked like he was going to finish in about fifth, and the knives came out for him. All the people were immediately, in all the big publications, there was stuff like, Joe Biden's not mentally fit enough to, be the Democratic candidate. He's clearly got some sort of, degenerative stuff. There was all this speculation about it. People talking about him like, go home, Grandpa. You need to, go on, sort of thing. And then suddenly, when he started winning, and it was pretty clear that it was going to be him, in first place, that just stopped immediately. And since then, like, it seems that, laughing about his mental state is off limits. Now, for one, I think it's, completely fine to say, like, you shouldn't laugh at a general old person for, losing his mind. But there is a point where, somebody is in such a position of power where I think actually it does become fair game. And clearly, if you're the president of the United States, it is. But somehow that's, something that was completely fine 2 years ago is now completely off limits. You can't talk about it as verboten. It's interesting how that works.
You're supposed to forget shit that happened like 5 minutes ago. Another thing, I'm like, so we're all doing our duty to forget the thing that you literally just said yesterday. So there's a definite demarcation where now you feel differently, and that's what, like, that emotional programming. That's why I think they love, like, the peaceful but fiery BLM shit here, because it's a controlled burn. Or even January 6th that they pretend there's it's the trucker thing is real. Those guys are not violent, and they have power, and that's a danger to the power structure. Like I was watching Chris Hedges say that about, it's not supposed to be cathartic. A protest, you're supposed to be getting something done, and then any kind of violence helps the power structure, because now we're going to get a police state like you've never seen, which was obvious to me from the stupid fucking slogan of defund the police. Nobody I know that, other than certain show business people, no black people I know were saying that. They were like, maybe reform the police, change, demilitarize them, people said to me, or like make it accountable legally if they do something wrong. That's a quick fix. But there's none of that. This is just a insane thing that you would only say out of anger, and then pallets of free bricks across the United States. Complimentary protest pallets of bricks were available. That couldn't be more obviously a thing to get people begging for more police once they've had a taste of, like, this dumb, then there's a mural on the ground that you're supposed to go, oh, something happened. And Juneteenth is a holiday now. Where the fuck did that come from?
Listen, I hadn't even heard of Juneteenth until a couple of years ago. So again, I think that's just another thing that's come in. As you said, Chris Hodges, he had that really interesting thing he said where, you want to have a protest where the people in power are feeling really uncomfortable. He talks about how Nixon has, lined up all these buses in 1970 outside the White House, and there's this big protest. I can't remember. I think it was an anti-war protest. And he was like, shit, they're going to break through these buses and they're going to storm the White House and they're going to get us. And he said that is exactly where you want people in power to feel like. You want them to feel afraid of the people. It's interesting, though, because I used to live in France, and while in the United States there's this really big thing about peaceful protests, it seems that, like, every time I was there, every few weeks when the government tried to take away, the fire brigade's 2-hour lunch with lobster, they would, like, go down and, like, burn down the presidential palace or something. There's a real sort of sense in France going back to the French Revolution in 1789 and the May 68 riots and all of this, that, like, it's their civic duty to, like, punch a cop or, like, burn a government building down.
Yeah, right.
And it's so different over there than it is in the US.
And that's got to be from French Revolution. I mean, that's like a pedigree of, like, that kind of it is interesting, a cultural thing like that. Like, it's not like America doesn't have that nonstop too, but some of the things are so dumb on the face of it, where I'm like, somebody's like handing this down and then getting it hyped up after like a few years of social media to so these are all working people in Canada doing this. The amount of smears about them, it's really telling too. You see the people that guy Ryan Grimm, unbelievable. While they're interviewing somebody about the drug protests, and Ryan Grimm keeps trying to link it to Charlottesville the whole time, which is like really conspicuous. Like, it stands out while they're talking about it. And the other chick on the hook is like, what does that have to do with this at all? Well, nothing. The important thing is to make it, because they're not like they're not violent. And something happened where, and because I didn't study any of this stuff, so I thought like people who were ostensibly like Marxist or socialist were pro-working class. I thought that was a thing. I did not understand there was a whole new thought in, we're going to take that, like the idea of working class, because we hate them, and we're going to make it based on things where like, I could be much richer than you, but I'm the one who's oppressed, because we've designated, like, that's what all the racial identity bullshit is. It's like a thing to, I've watched this over and over. Never experienced this. I lived in a lot of like hoods. The people that live there, I never heard any of this they don't know what any of these new nonsense words mean, They don't, it's only people that I know grew up richer than me or went to a better school than I did that say this, and they love it because it's a chance to be like, I'm the good one by birth. It's like another aristocracy thing. And there's nothing about, like, they'll talk about like tax the rich or something, but there's nothing where they're going to privilege be addressed. So then the way that all trickles out is, remember Kamala Harris running and all the shit she did to protect the slave labor market we have by not releasing people that were ordered released from the federal, because she said it would disrupt the prison labor. The kind of articles that came out were like, yeah, she did those things, but she had to do that as a woman of color to make it. Like, how you describe the shitty situation of this, like, you got to suck up and not. Well, that's what she has to do as a woman of color. So really, we should just be rejoicing that a woman of color has made it this far. It was almost like the shit with Obama droning people, which I definitely thought. I was like, well, I mean, he's the first black president. He's got to drone some people. Like, was he going to not drone people? They're calling him a Muslim. He's got to drone somebody. And and they're very, the idea of a surgical strike. I heard Bill Maher just say it the other night, like, we can put a missile through a window and not even. No, we can't. They've just been saying that. People still think that we can have what surgery, by the way, have you gotten where they're like, we're going to set off a series of tiny explosions to open you up surgically. We're going to explode parts of you to fix you. That's not a thing. And I didn't know that. I thought that was a thing they had because I saw the green screen of the fucking missile go down and then it turns black. I assume the missile hit its target with no problems.
Yeah, exactly. We never see the consequences of the missiles, do we? We only see, when you think about war, you think about, a plane, maybe it's dropping the bomb out there. It doesn't look like it's laser guided or anything. But yeah, we never see the consequences of it. I was kind of naive enough to think that this kind of culture was going to die away when Joe Biden was elected president. This sort of like Me Too era would probably go away. Now, I think definitely we have to address, like, clearly, like, people for decades have been getting away with, like, sexual assault in the workplace. But I kind of naively thought that all the people who were talking about Believe Women, when, Biden has got, like, somebody who's accusing him of raping her in a public building, I kind of expected that they would at least address that, but instead so many people just started like deleting all those tweets and media figures started attacking her. I'm talking about Tara Reid, of course. Mm-hmm. And like, listen, there's obviously a lot of Trump propaganda about Biden, but those videos of him like being exceptionally creepy with teenage girls like in public, they're real. I mean, they're not doctored. And at the same time, the show just kind of goes on and, we just kind of forget that and, move on to the next thing. We live in a sort of 280 character world now where people don't remember things even from 2 years ago.
Isn't that up from like 200 characters? Like, what was Twitter originally?
Yeah, Twitter was originally 140 characters, but
we're up in characters.
They kind of, now I think about it, limiting the amount of fun you can have with something is actually a really good way of making it work. Everybody's playing Wordle now, which is this word game, but you can only play it once a day, and that's the big thing. And suddenly, that guy managed to sell it to the New York Times for like, well, I'm not sure exactly how much, but I think it was 7 or 8 million. It was reported. So
interesting.
Guy's done a fantastic job there. He set himself up for life.
Well, that's the other thing, but. If people, I don't know, like I've been playing these children's games since I was a child and I didn't stop. And so not a lot of people are, actually probably a lot of people, I guess my age, but if you don't follow anything with video games, one, the mobile market it's the games they make now, they're proud of it. They have all these like big like conventions where they say you find whales and charge them. People just keep putting money in to this thing. Some of these games, you don't even have to play them. You just buy like the game as is, and then you can hit a fast forward and the game just plays itself. Like it takes out the middleman of you playing the goddamn game. And never mind Call of Duty and all that shit. That's like this. The mobile market is the biggest thing. So every major corporation, everything's anti the consumer, anti the fan now by design. It's all like, no, you're not. We're not trying to beg for your money. We don't even know if you're good enough to enjoy a product yet. We haven't even established if you're one of the good people who should even have a Snickers or a fucking Gillette razor. What kind of man are you? Maybe look at yourself before you even use our razors, because me too. Remember the Gillette commercial?
Oh, yeah.
So that shift happened.
I think a lot of corporations do that deliberately, though, right? They're trying.
They all made a shift to it, all of them. And
they're like, how are we going to get as much, infamy and publicity out of this? Nike did the same thing, I think, when they did the Colin Kaepernick ad. Mm-hmm. When it's like, we know this is going to super piss off conservatives, but we've made this calculated decision that if we spend $50 million on this, we're probably going to reap extra sales from it. And, the point is that, with ad blockers and stuff we were talking about before, you can block out ads. But when social media is talking about Nike and Colin Kaepernick or Gillette razors, you can't block that out because that is the content. And so ultimately, the entire country, the entire world is exposed to this constant reminder that Gillette razors exist or Nike shoes exist. And ultimately, it's been very profitable. It's actually kind of what Fox News did in the 90s when they thought, instead of going for this mass market, we're going to like hyper, appeal to one section of the market and we're going to dominate it like that. And they've been super successful. And that's kind of how that was kind of the end of that sort of objectivity phrase being used at the beginning of the end of it.
Well, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because now the Fox business model is what pretty much every cable news goes for. Every cable news channel goes for. Like MSNBC is kind of the liberal version of that, so is CNN. And yet Fox has managed to make incredible profits from it. And
well, they're all of them are like, they're all, we got to kill. First of all, they're like, we have to destroy Fox News. It shouldn't even be on. And then we will continue on with their same business model because that's fine. And it's really, this is the other thing is, and I wasn't aware of this until I started talking to different people. Like a bunch of these places don't have to make money. They're getting all venture capital or investment or some kind of grants from the government. A lot of them, like podcast channels is one. My friend Lewis, who him and the other guy that own this, and I have another friend out here on the West Coast, and I was asking who his competition is. He goes, maybe just Lewis. So, and I'm like, really? Everybody else is venture capital. Every other podcast channel is venture capital. So there's like some kind of tax. It always seemed like a tax write-off, all this stuff to me, because it was so bizarre, And I think it is kind of. I think there's some. Anyway, I want to show. Will you put it on my Instagram, Mike, with the Biden that got the warning on? So I want to show you this has got a sensitive.
The same one that's on your Twitter.
Yeah, in fact, you can put it on my Twitter so I can see the warning. Because I'm curious. I'm curious what you think the sensitive content of this is. And that Biden thing you're talking about, here's what I suspect. Most people, when they don't pay attention to him, they just know he's not Trump. Most of them were never political. They were forced to become aware of it because of all the hysteria. And they know they just want it to be quiet. And they think Biden has a stutter. They've internalized that story that he just has a stutter. So it's mean to even bring up the insane things, and they just hold on to it no matter what. Like, all right, go ahead, press play.
United States. I'm awake. My fellow geraniums. Our nation's in crisis. Joe Brogan has just said the N-word to Snooki Goldberg. No one's watching the Winter Limp Bizkits. And I've just been informed the Prime Minister of Canada, Jussie Trombone, has been killed by trucks. He'll be sorely missed. Not only was he the first black guy Pez minister, he was a great American. And also a great Muslim guy. Our farts and prayers go out to the... Not our farts. Look. There's these trucks. They transform. They turn into robots. Well, man, we gotta get these things running around, honking around, turning into people. But don't you worry, don't you fret. Uncle Joey's on the case. First, I sent Vice Principus Canola Hairlip to the planet of the truck people to open a dialogue with Optimus Prime. Second, I've asked Congress to increase my dosage of talkie pills. And finally, I've approved emergency funding to distribute free crack pipes to every man, woman, and transgender. To help us stay alert for when the truck people... They got maple syrup for blood, man. Stupid bastard doesn't even know Wimpy Goldblums.
So, oh, that was the promo. So,
Yeah.
that's Kyle's impression, which, like, somebody just posted a clip of Biden saying we were never going to have peace in Ukraine, but he meant Afghanistan. Did you see
Yeah, he
that
said
clip of him?
Ukraine. Oh, I mean Iraq. Oh, I mean Afghanistan. It was pretty incredible, that.
He did what my mom does when she's calling to one of us and she says all of our names. Like, right, Kurt, right, Eric. I was just pretty funny because my mom follows all podcasts. She follows all comedians that I know or whatever and you know, and I have that memory too of people's names that are like popular with the kids. Like I do the exact same kind of thing. But I would just chalk Joe Biden up to that, except there's so many like of those weird, the supposedly dementia. People walk with their arms not moving. Did you know that? That's like
No.
Biden does that. He walks without moving his arms a lot. And then the aggression and trail offs. And if you think about it, didn't Reagan do his whole second term completely with Alzheimer's? And they just now say it like his age, like, yeah, he had Alzheimer's. We didn't know what the hell. We're just like, hey, we got 4 more years, I guess.
You know, you played that clip and you're like, oh, what could possibly, set off the algorithm there, but or set off that sensitive content. But we don't talk about how much algorithms really control our lives now, like control our businesses. Algorithms written by some Silicon Valley geek decide what Facebook shows you, what Instagram shows you, what Twitter shows you. Algorithms help the police decide where to spend money. They decide things with, like healthcare services, government stuff, decide things based on these like things that are written down. And they talk about it being objective, but it's actually, very much not the case. And if you work for Jimmy Dore, I mean, I know that he's gotten a hell of a lot of trouble with algorithms. I know at one point he was even, for some of his videos, he would spell out the sensitive word. Like if he was doing a video on Syria, he would write S-Y-R-I-A. And yeah, it's the same with Mintpress. We get absolutely hammered. I wrote that article about Bill Gates that went viral. I think it was actually just taken off for sensitive content because it said Bill Gates and it also had, vaccine in the first paragraph and then it said Africa. So I could totally see why a computer would think, well, let's just take this off to be safe. But ultimately, I find myself on Twitter and other places being very conscious of that. Like I deliberately don't get into fights with people. Like I'm always like, use any swear words, don't use that, don't use this. So I'm already pre-censoring myself because I know that I'm the sort of person, I'm in the sort of political sphere of the type of people who might get kicked off Twitter for no reason at any point because people I work with, that's happened to them. They've been suspended or not, permanently deleted, but they have all of these things going on. So it's already like you're one of the bad ones right there. And, ultimately it does, it affects people's careers. I mean, if the algorithm was kind to you as a podcaster or a YouTube content creator, that could mean the difference between you being able to afford a mortgage and not. And so when I was watching that short clip that you just showed, I actually noted down 6 different words that I thought these might well set off the algorithm.
Okay.
And they were Joe Rogan. You showed a picture of a guy in blackface. That was Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
That could set off an algorithm. He said N-word, which I thought maybe that could set off an algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
Muslim, crack pipes, and transgender. All of those things I thought potentially they could be setting off an algorithm.
Do you think they anticipated transgender as a...
No,
yes, of course.
You said transgender. Oh, okay. I thought it was gender. Well, that's what I heard. So maybe that's what the algorithm would hear as well. But the point is that there are so many buzzwords there where it's like any of those could potentially be doing that. And that's the thing. If you talk about sensitive or controversial subjects online, especially if the algorithm has already decided that you're a bad person, like if you're working for, Washington Post or CNN or Fox or something, they're not going to demote you or delist you deliberately. You're on the good list already.
You're whitelisted.
There are already secret kind of blacklisted people who the algorithm deliberately suppresses, whether it's Google or Facebook or wherever. So when you're already in that sort of section and you've used all of those words, it could have been any of those, frankly.
Okay, wait. So this is why. So I would think that naturally is that. However, Kyle, the guy doing the impression, he tweeted it as well. I didn't retweet him. He just tweeted it himself separately. There's no warning on that. There was no warning on the Joe Biden one previous to that. I think this got individually flagged, and I suspect it doesn't have to do with Kyle because it has to do with Jimmy, like something Jimmy Dore. Like there's somebody, because a few times they'll have a person put a sensitive content on, and it's just weird that it would not be on the other instances of it being. So I might already be on a thing like he's not whitelisted thing on what do you call it, on Instagram. So we started making this show on YouTube, and Kyle's Instagram is pretty popular. It's like it's almost like 900,000 subscribers, and he does these face swaps impressions. Okay, and he got squelched, and he knew he did because suddenly he's getting 11,000 views from stuff that was 900,000, which we use that to get advertising to pay for the show to make it. So I found out, a friend of mine, Brett Ernst, who's he's on that Karate Kid or the Cobra Kai show on that popular one. He knows, he lives in Vegas. I had no idea about this. There's a whole industry of people that just handle, internet personalities like YouTube, TikTok, all that kind of shit. The money is must be even more than anything in Hollywood. These people have huge followings, the kind of TV used to get, like the kind the Olympics used to get when it first came out or something, like 14 million, and you've never heard of any of them. There's some guys that are like an Impractical Joker show. I never heard of them. They have more viewers. It was some crazy number, like worldwide. And so they do things to get around these algorithms that, so Kyle, we go to his consultant that Brett knew. He makes a call to Facebook. This is before it was Meta, I guess. Because you couldn't contact them and ask what's happening, but you can go to a specialist who knows someone that works there, like a PI or something, and they go, oh yeah, he's been shadow banned. They told us the exact date and what it was he posted that got a shadow banned. It was bizarre. It was a flyer for a live show we were doing at Largo of these characters, Pussies it's called. But it's all over his thing. He's never had a problem with it. For some reason, and they said they had 37 complaints that it was bad. I don't know what was offensive about this. Like none of the videos where I would think someone would, and I don't try to be offensive either. I was trying to be funny. But so then the guy had to chain together, or he had a thing where he has all these Facebook accounts chained together that they blast your account on Instagram with, and it wakes up the account digitally, because there's something set digitally that will make it wake up with massive amount of anyway, I had no idea that this is the kind of shit they have to do to get around that. But people already know how to do it, and you can pay them to figure it out. Here's a little thing they do, which I had no idea. and it doesn't sound so complicated, but it's not the kind of thing I would have thought of. When somebody puts out a new video, because they're always watching why they're going up, they'll put up AstroTurf attacks on them in the comments. So the fans get mad who love it and fight with those people putting in shitty comments about their thing they like. And that makes the algorithm see engagement, because it's engagement, you know. So there's like, well, you know, all this stuff I found about it, and people have already figured out like 10 years ago exactly how to game it the most. And so that's why I'm not so, like, the thing with the algorithm is like, there's always somebody figuring out how to get around this shit that you don't even know about, you know, because I didn't know any tech stuff. And the thing that's weird now is the stuff, like that thing you just described of using words. All my friends on every channel, no matter what it is, when COVID came out and they weren't talking, wasn't any vaccine at the time, but you weren't supposed to say a lab leak or something, you know, that was the thing you weren't allowed to say. None of them would say the word COVID. They would say the beer bug. They wouldn't even say corona. There's an entire language, if you watch YouTube, that people use to get around saying, like, you can't say Nazi, okay? And beep that. That's the ultimate N-word now. You can't say it, even if you're a history channel, because the algorithms are set up to, oh, it's not, we don't care about what your side is, we don't want the controversy of talking about it. This is a business we're running. And so it reminds me of S&P standards when we would write for shows, and we would all get a hearty laugh on Monday morning from S&P about what we had to change and why. And it would never be based on any kind of like, this is swear. You could say like swears, you know, but only certain ones for bizarre reasons. And so like I was on this cartoon called Ugly Americans, and there was a plot about this robot made in the 50s for if there's nuclear war. He was filled with the scientist's own sperm to repopulate the earth if need be. And he had busted out and was going around squirting people, okay? So the note from S&P was, I don't know how they originally had it, if it was a fire hose of, of jizz hitting people, but they said it can't be like that. It's got to be a certain amount of jizz. So then the robot would just be a few drips would come out of it, okay? And the thing that's so funny is the few drips is so much grosser than if they had made it the old way. Like the thing of the robot's ejaculating is like, it's somehow worse. It's like Patton Oswalt used to have a joke about that, like when they censor the word on regular TV from the movie and they make it somehow sounds worse, or like a dirtier word than just saying the word. That the algorithms are doing that. They're doing the standards and practices, and standards and practices was based around legal shit. It's basically some lawyers and I don't know who consultant. They go, how much bullshit are we going to get for this, this, and this? And they're bizarre. And watching now, there's a whole thing of like a different language people have to speak if they're hip to what they need to do to get their views up. And I don't know, it reminds me, I bring it up a lot, but it reminds me of that. Do you ever have to read Bible stuff as a kid?
No.
Oh, well, the Tower of Babel, that story of they're building a tower to take over heaven. That reminds me of the singularity promise that we had if we were all the technology, and then we will be God and whatever. And now people who speak the same language cannot understand each other now. Yeah. Like God confused the language. It just sounds like that so much.
It's incredible how much power these algorithms have. You know, talking about, you know, political people, like people are changing the length of their videos. People are changing the subject of their videos because they're like, well, listen, I could do something about this really important topic, but it's going to get 10,000 views. But if I do a video dunking on somebody from a different part of, you know, the political spectrum, I might get 100,000. And then suddenly it's like, hey, I can afford it next week. Or, hey, I can afford a new car or whatever. Yeah. And it really pushes us into directions which I think are really quite frivolous instead of looking at like important issues. One channel, which I think you probably might be slightly familiar with, is Status Quo, who is Jordan Chariton. He worked with Jimmy Dore at the Young Turks.
I kind of know it. I didn't like Young Turks. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the ground at the January 6th protests, and he was actually doing the live stream, and he, you know, sent it out on YouTube, and it was getting tons of views. And he actually signed deals with some like mainstream media outlets that they would use exactly his footage, and they would put it on their channel as their live stream. And what happened to him is that his channel actually got shut down because of that live stream footage, because, you know, showing an illegal event. but the exact same footage that was being streamed at the same time on corporate media, their channels, they were not taken down. So again, it's interesting that like his stuff is getting taken down because he's not considered an important enough source. But if it was CNBC or whoever it was, they're on this like good list that you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like these like Facebook has an incredible amount of power over us, because if you remember, right at the sort of aftermath of January 6th, people weren't talking about, well, what are we going to do about this? People weren't, phoning their senators. They were actually sending emails to Mark Zuckerberg and Jack from Twitter being like, you've got to take Donald Trump down.
Oh, yeah. Wow. That's a good point.
It's kind of like this tacit acceptance there that actually these enormous Silicon Valley giants have a huge amount of power over our entire, media ecosystem, but also our if you want to call it a democracy, our democracy. We've turned into we've turned into this like tattletale culture. I mean, I remember it kind of the first place I saw it was like with far right, brigades going after like feminist YouTubers or something in the early 2010s, and they would get like
their
channels put down.
Are you talking about Gamergate?
Yeah, I think
okay,
something like that. Not
that's
just
great.
Gamergate, but other things. But then it's just kind of turned into everybody across the spectrums doing it to everybody else the whole time. And now, we're just in this complete cluster F right now.
Dude, the whole time. So when that happened, because I hate when somebody puts gate on the end of something. Like that's like I was maybe like a writer thing. I'd like, can you be more hacky of saying gate and all this?
Yeah.
I have a friend where they called him Comics Gate. He used to be an artist at DC, who's, by the way, a great guy. I can't believe the amount of smears about him. And he didn't make up that term. They made that up. So what Gamergate was, they had this whole lie that it was about a woman's sexual choices and some guys were mad. And at the time, I didn't really pay close attention to it. Even though I liked games, I'm like, well, what do you think? They're going to be good? It's a goddamn games magazine. But no, it wasn't about that. And I didn't realize what it was about. I wrote for these video game awards for the first, 5 years that they did them. Now they're considered a legitimate thing. Award shows are merely it's just to get advertisers. They're not, and people get upset about who got what bullshit award. They're not a thing. They're specifically to sell advertising. Most of them are not judged fairly in some kind of way. I guess the Oscars, it's still the dipshits at the Academy, and it's nonsense. It's all nonsense. But this was a new award show when I started. So I had no idea how that stuff worked until I worked on a show behind the scenes. And I'm like, oh, people are going to be mad at this. This is so whoever has the most money, basically all of the games journalism, which is where you review a product, whether it's good or not. Okay. That shifted completely to PR, much the way you hear about how the press has these corrupted relationships. And that is exactly what they were complaining about. And it got smeared as some dumb fucking, the feminist that you're talking about was somebody, again, some consultant scam artist. And video games are a place on the wall that wasn't being watched. Who cares about these nerds? Who cares? They need more feminism. That's why they're in all this dumb shit. And it was cover for how these giant, almost like monopolies now, took over all these IPs and started turning out crap. The games come out not finished. They have microtransactions out the ass. Okay, you know what the microtransactions are?
Yeah, you were talking about this earlier. I mean, I think that
what they are is transactions. So you buy a game, right? Its consumer abuse has been going on forever, and the press is complicit in it. And if people don't know that world, the story you hear is some nonsense. It's the same. This is what's amazing to me is just because I happen to have interest in two things, I'm like, I don't know if people know this is everywhere. The same, so basically, microtransactions, the first one to do it was Bethesda, who just got bought by Microsoft. And they had this hugely popular role-playing game, and they started selling items. If you've heard about the controversy or NFTs, they started selling items in the game. So you get some, an outfit for your horse or something. It was $1.
Oh, was this World of Warcraft or something? Was that the game?
That Oblivion.
It was it was kind of instead of just buying the game for $50 or whatever, it was, well, For
Free
as
to
long as
play?
you want to play it. Yeah, it's free. Or well, maybe you pay $10 for the game, but then you have to pay $12.99 a month for the rest of your life to use it. That's
Yep.
the sort of new model. And then, as you said, there's all these
Yep.
sorts of in-game purchases where it's really hard to do the game without them. So it's just an amazing business model, and it
Yeah.
really drives people crazy, doesn't it?
Well, so this is but I didn't know the half of it. There's a guy, Upper Echelon Games, I watch, who reports on this stuff really well. Because it's more corporate abuse. It has nothing to do with fucking feminism, any of that bullshit. It has nothing to do with any of it. They're the same way we have a shortage of hospital beds or whatever. The people that make these games, and it's known, it's horrible how they're treated. The labor shit in these games. In fact, remember Grand Theft Auto 4? The first one that was really popular, and the main character is a guy who's like Eastern, he's like Serbian vaguely or something. And that game made more than any fucking movie made in profits. And the guy got paid $100,000 to do the part, and that's it. Because there's no laws. Just like with the internet, there's no labor. Hollywood has these labor things, but thank God for. That's how I got insurance when I be in the Writers Guild. So these labor disputes all of them are being covered over with you're a racist, you hate women, you love all this alt-right's the number one thing they love to make. Anyway, the microtransactions, they're just transactions. People were like, "What is this shit? We're going to pay $1 to get a horse?" It was crazy, and they abuse the hell out of it. They all do the same thing. These companies, they abuse the hell out of a thing, and until there's pushback, consumer pushback. Then they walk it back a little bit, but they've already crossed the line a little to make it more and more greedy. And this has been happening. So the journalists, they're like fucking sharecroppers. The same with the people who work drawing like Superman. This is what Evan explained to me, which I don't know if you were familiar with this. The queer Superman that came out, and all the media was like, "Hey, Superman's queer now. It's great. Who would hate this other than people who hate gays?" Okay, so it's not Superman, one. It's his son that they made up recently, and he's dating this guy with pink hair. It's insane, the okay? But the reason they do this, and they've been doing all kinds of stupid things, is to not pay the survivors of the original creators. So every 10 years or 5 years, the lawsuit comes up again about the rights to Superman, this huge IP that's made millions of dollars at very little of it gets back to the thing, and they have to change things. But it's like 25%. They have to do these things to change the character. So Superman had a spit curl, and they got rid of it. And by doing that, they were able to hold on to their copyright or something, Warner Brothers. So one of Ethan's jobs was to change the design slightly every 5 years when the family's got their lawsuit coming up again. And this is just another example of that. Well, he's queer. So the creators got stiffed. In fact, all these comics, the creators get stiffed. Okay. Now, the way the law works is if you're another guy who works there now, who makes dick and who's writing this, and he thinks he's like owning the chuds or whatever the fuck they say, he's getting paid. He created the gay son, but he's not getting any royalties on that because that's a derivative work. So they have that's why Star Wars sucked. We want to kill off all the characters these people loved because Disney owns it now. Remember C-3PO had a red arm? If you saw C-3PO's red arm, what that could very well be is a sly use of the 25% rule because it's his one arm.
Wow, okay.
Okay. Now, I don't know 100% what it is, but it seems very likely because that's how this shit works. And so every single culture war nonsense thing that you hear about now, it's almost never the real story. It's about as reliable as what you would hear about Syria. And I don't know that people are aware of it, even people that really like research their shit, because if it's not a thing you care about, and why would you as an adult who reports on important things, why would you give a shit? But this is everywhere. And the crazy thing now is when people remember the 1%, everybody talk about the 1%. I think people, it's just dawning on people. It ain't the 1%. It's like the 0.001% has so much fucking money now that they can keep stuff going according, like if you're Bill Gates doing experiments in Africa with your wackadoo technology ideas, all that shit's here. Like the propaganda that you drop on Iraq or Afghanistan with Spider-Man, they're doing it here. They're doing it, and they're doing it to their own citizens as if their English is not their first language. It's almost like colonization is what's happening. So that thing that got framed as all these people don't like feminine, none of that was true. I mean, every part of that was a lie to smear people. And I'll email it to you. My friend that does a Star Wars thing, he got attacked by a site called Will you find Rewriting Ripley, Mike? So they made a chart. Now all they do is talk about how these giant monopolies ruined
Say it
things
again.
that
What
they
do you want
like.
me to look?
It's called Rewriting Ripley, and there's a chart connecting my buddy Gary that we had on. I shit you not, to Steve Bannon. When I saw it, I'm like, this looks like the yellow cake uranium chart. like I think a bunch of people have come back from the war, and that were doing that stuff, and they work in PR and shit now, and they provide the people that did the hit job on Rogan, those 3 Midas Touch or whatever. They're a super PAC. And they were auditioning to get more work doing political smear jobs for like whoever. That's why we have like the Lincoln Project, that we're all Republican, but Trump's so bad that now they do weird, dirty tricks for Democrats. They always just switch sides back and forth. Did you find it?
You're looking for a chart, you said, or I have their Twitter account. It does.
They have a thing, Rewriting Ripley, the alt-right pipeline or something. I couldn't believe it when I saw this. It was something like the kind of propaganda you would have to do about a country that I'd never heard of, rather than about people that I actually know. And I think everyone's so split off from each other with the bubble shit now. There's no way you're ever going to fight. You might as well be another country. Like video game nerds might be as well be another country to a bunch of people. They don't know what goes on in their wackadoo country. I know they're nerds. It's how we were about Muslims in other countries. That's what we do here now. So do you know who probably paid for this? An executive at Disney who fucked up Star Wars movies. You can pay to have these hit pieces done now. It's a huge business. And the algorithm, and if you're with a big company like Disney or something, it'll be put up at the top of Google or whatever. They can arrange. Everyone colludes together to make this thing work. Okay, so go down a little bit. It's the industry of outrage. Gamergate and boycott Star Wars. So when they say the industry of outrage, like that's bad to be outraged about consumer abusive practices. The guy upper echelon, in fact, if you look him up, he has a video where somebody from Forbes did an interview with him about why are they all so angry and what is that like? And he did the classic thing of talking to a reporter, not knowing that when they work for, I've done this too, with New York Times, not knowing what they were out to like do to me, thinking I'm just talking to somebody who wants to get, I didn't realize at this point they all have the story in mind they're going to print. So this guy, he explains all these anti-consumer practices of these giant corporations to this reporter of Forbes, who then writes an article, how anger sells, how the being negative is just what sells, because that's why they're being so negative. And I mean, that accusation of you're just being negative is the most working at a company that's doing abusive shit narrative. It's the same as, what are you being so negative about Iraq? They want democracy. Were you racist? They can't have democracy? That's what people said back then. These tricks are all being used over and over. How white supremacy, misogyny, and hate targeted the Star Wars sequel trilogy and won. This doesn't have the chart, does it? If you scroll down, I just want to show them the chart real quick. Keep going. Oh, they spelled the word. Yeah, keep going. Oh, here we go. Do you see this? Never Just Trolls, the reactionary right-wing network behind the fandom to alt-right pipeline. Now, all the people that I know that they put on this chart, personally, none of them have any. I mean, I don't know Tim Pool. Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers probably is more conservative than ever. Where's Gary? Is this all of them? Scroll it down a little more. There's more people, I thought. Maybe it's just those ones. Go back to the chart connecting people, though. Okay, so basically, they just took pictures and just drew lines to them. And that's the whole thing. Can you make it, like, bigger? Oh, yeah, Ethan's on it. Okay, go. So I don't know who Peter Brimlow is. Ben Shapiro, who is connected to Milo Yiannopoulos and the alt-right, a Jewish guy. Okay, whatever. Richard Spencer, the only time I ever hear this asshole brought up is by like CNN, like when they have him on to ask him his dumb views. I don't know really. Oh, Mike Cernovich is a guy, another guy that he trolled corporate press, and the smear on him is unbelievable. Ethan's my friend. He used to work for DC that got run out under nonsense things. What do these people have to even do with each other other than I don't like all these people? Like, this was paid for. This is a paid thing by some executive to smear critics because the stupid YouTube videos, they care about those a lot. Like any of that Mintpress stuff that you guys got algorithm squashed, that Bill Gates thing, I'm sure that was no small thing. In fact, before we go, just because I think I just asked you before we recorded, but just so people know, that's why I first heard of Mintpress was the Bill Gates thing. I never before that heard of where he came from. I always was like, well, I know the story. He was a nerd and the other guy was a hippie, cool guy. And then the nerd guy did okay in the end. That's all I knew. Nothing about where we came from. I guess I assumed he was like middle class, but where does he come from?
Well, I mean, he certainly comes from a very sort of elite family. I mean, that is the story, that he was this little nerd who, worked in, in tech and was very interested in it and started up this little company called Microsoft. And through, a little bit of plucky gumption, he managed to make it big. But the reality is that when you look at people like Bezos and Gates and these guys, and Elon Musk is an even better example. The guy's, parents owned an emerald mine in South Africa. But with Gates, I mean, a lot of his success is down to his super rich mother. She was actually on the board of IBM in the 1980s. And it was her that really, pushed IBM to sort of install Microsoft products as a standard on their machines, which made Microsoft kind of the industry standard in the 1980s, and then into the 1990s when Gates was actually taken to court by the US government for his monopolistic practices. And the article you're talking about specifically is called Revealed Documents Show Bill Gates Has Given $319 Million to Media Outlets. I simply went through it took absolute days just going through thousands upon thousands of grants made by the Gates Foundation and, typing keywords in, looking for things like newspaper, podcast, radio, etc. And I found that an absolute bare minimum, which is clearly going to be way below the actual figure, that the Gates Foundation is sponsoring media around the world to the tune of at least 319 million. And they include some of the biggest media outlets in the world, including NPR, I'll go down the list now, NPR, CNN, the BBC, Univision, the Financial Times, The Guardian, Al Jazeera. There's absolutely just a ton of really big ones, especially in the United States, PBS, Gannett, ProPublica. He really likes to sponsor a lot of Washington State-based media as well, which helps his own image in his little world. But Gates is really. And he also, of course, sponsors journalism colleges and all sorts of initiatives, journalism centers. So it's now quite possible for somebody to go to, some sort of training as a journalist paid for by Gates, go to a center paid for by Gates, and then write articles and make a career talking about things that Gates really wants to be talked about. And specifically, what Gates is really interested in is education and health. And he's got a lot of influence in both. He's one of the big pushers of the charter school movement in the United States, which is very, very popular with businesses, but very unpopular with teachers' unions. If you know what that is, I'm obviously simplifying, but it's kind of like turning public schools over to businesses and letting them run as a private business. And of course, what you do there is you immediately streamline it by, firing teachers and hiring them back if they're not allowed unions, etc. So it's not a great, system. Right. And, they're able to hothouse these kids and get them, a better grade in math or science or something. But, at what cost to their education and to what cost to the community. And his stuff about global health is he's had a huge deleterious effect on global health just in the past couple of years. I mean, Oxford University famously came up with this vaccine, the AstraZeneca one, we know it as. They were originally going to just let that patent be completely free and let the entire world copy their stuff. And so everybody could get vaccinated for a couple of dollars. But Bill Gates, who has a lot of connections with Oxford University, has given them millions of dollars just in the past couple of years, picks up the phone and rings up and says, you really have to partner with a private company and give them the patent, etc., so that, this is how the free market works, and, they can use their, their efficiency to get it, around the world. That's clearly not happened. And, if you look at the stats now, for instance, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, less than 1% of their population has even been offered a vaccine yet. And that is in no small part down to Bill Gates. And yet, because he funds this wide plethora of media, most of the stuff you'll see in the press about him is pretty much puff pieces. People don't go near this because either they are thinking about getting a job in one of these places and know, Bill Gates is one of the biggest funders. It's probably not best to, bite the hand that feeds you. Or, it's just kind of being, pushed off to the side as something that we shouldn't really talk about. And that's really important because we rely on these media outlets to shine a light on the powerful and really hold them to account and, scrutinize them. And who is more powerful than one of the richest men in the entire world? Bill Gates has got an enormous amount of power in his hands. And yet, unfortunately, we've got this massive conflict of interest going on.
Yeah, well, dude, that's what it seemed like some kind of funding was coming through because of the bizarre messaging that was coming into places where you wouldn't even, because, here's what we got from by the way, for the activism in video games. Now they have things like fucking Fortnite will play a speech by Martin Luther King virtually. Have you seen this shit that they do?
No, I don't really. I'm not in the video games world.
It's a shooting bang bang game that starts off like people are gonna log in. It's the grossest marriage of things, like the separate. I've said on here a lot, and I heard people say on Bill Maher too. But we have this big separation of church and state thing, and we don't have any commercial and state like separation. I just want the state to make sure they're not trying to like kill me, and I don't want them. Like, ooh, we need to support this fucking thing. Because, like, these are idiots that make these decisions. And that, when you just described AstraZeneca, that sounded like a 4-year comic signing a deal that they don't understand because they didn't have the right representatives. So you have all these lawyers and stuff to know if you're getting cheated by some company with a contract written in legalese. Like, that sounds like a Hollywood, hey kid, don't worry, we're gonna make a vaccine to star. Like, none of it gets. We're all on our like 4th helping over here, and like people never had one goddamn dose, and the same people who are like have 4 helpings of it are like, everyone has to get it. And you're like, you don't seem too concerned about all these people that had no access to it and they have to use what did you call it, horse dewormer now? That's what these people had. Not you, I mean, I mean, like. Well, it's good enough for the people you didn't give the vaccine to, the horse dewormer. That's interesting. But I don't think any people are aware of it. I think that's they get their information from Stephen Colbert doing a song and dance, a lot of these people. I live in Hollywood, so that's why I say that. But it really is like this drive of like, don't do your own research. Get your information from fucking like Disney Plus. Or if it's something for adults, it's made like a kid's show. Like that's the convince. They're like, this will convince people. Like Colbert's going to do this dance with cartoon syringes, and it's like everything's a profound insult to your intelligence. Like they figured out what's the lowest, and that's how it has always been. But it's on a level now where I never saw anything like it because I didn't think I was particularly. I wasn't particularly hyper aware of like the Matrix. I grew up with like a nice Matrix, and now this is like the Matrix Resurrections level quality. There's a significant downgrade, and I know it has something to do with like a monopoly taking over the Matrix, and not having like real midwits making the decisions of like, this is a believable thing, and this is and Even a stupid person can see through it. It seems like. Anyway, I got to wrap up. We actually went pretty long, but thanks for coming, man. Good talking to you. Very interesting.
Yeah, good talking with you, man.
Come back on sometime, especially if you have like a thing being squelched, like a Gates thing. That's especially important because I like having like I said, I'll go on a lot of people's different shows, like my friend Sitch and Adam, that they just break down. They do like debates. They break down. There's a lot of reaction stuff, and they were calling Jimmy Venezuela Jimmy.
Cool.
Right, because that's like people are like, how do you support? I had Aaron Mate on. And so my friend's like, well, he denies the Uyghur genocide. Okay, now I went to China. People that I met in China, that was the first time I ever heard of Uyghurs. Like from an expat, so I'm like, oh, and the Chinese guy was like, yeah, well, they're terrorists. It sounded very Guantanamo to me when I was there. So I go, I know there's a fucked up thing going on because they weren't like exactly hiding it. They were like, yeah, of course, and Aaron was like, well, I'm not saying there's not abuses. It's the word genocide is a very specific crime that you don't stretch unless it's a genocide. Because if we're going to do that, I didn't even think of that. Like, I was like, well, you deny the Uyghur genocide, you must think nothing's going on. And I don't think people, unless I talk to people, I won't hear it. So I like to get like, I guess you're on some kind of fringe list. You must be.
Well, I try and keep that. Yeah, I think I try and keep myself as clean as possible, as I said, but not like interacting with people, not trying to like provoke the powers that be. Yeah. But, ultimately, if you're going to start challenging power and you get to a certain level of notoriety, that banhammer is coming for you. And, with that Bill Gates article, it actually went viral. It got hundreds of thousands of views, but because we didn't get any monetization from it, because Google decided that, I'd imagine the company actually lost money running that story. And that is a real powerful disciplining function of the media when if you're going to break something and it's like, well, man, do I really want to spend, this amount of days, commissioning this only to lose money on it? Yeah. Yeah,
it's unfortunate, man, because a lot of stuff is not, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say I'm anything, but like the idea, I just still remember as a kid back when Ross Perot was running, he probably would have been better actually than all these people, but you got to run it like a business. You got to run the company. Well, we do that, everyone. How do you like it? We run it like so when the arguments about if it's going to be right, you want the government to control that's the arguments, the dumbass arguments we have here. And I was like, no, I'd like a corporation the size of a small government to I'd like to belong to 6 different like nations, and 5 of them are brands that don't have any constitution whatsoever. And if I say something, they'll smear me as I've been through that whole machine already. So it was a real eye opener because I never did think the press was great, but I didn't understand the level of they just fucking lie. And I don't think people do. So I don't know. A lot of people I would encourage people to check out like Mintpress or especially Max and Aaron at Gray Zone. They're very leftist, Max and Aaron, but they are on a list of being, I think, probably alt-right. I'm guessing based on how they treat you if you try to tell the truth about the wrong thing. You're like, you're not leftist. What are you? That's where we're at.
Oh yeah, Aaron's a really good journalist, but I think he does get it in the neck. I don't know what his argument about the Uyghurs is, so I'm not going to comment. But yeah, he does get it in the neck constantly, and I think part of it is that he's willing to put his head above the parapet and really go in for these fights. I think that might just be his style. But yeah, if you're going to be challenging power and you're going to be a journalist, you're going to run into some problems, that's for sure.
Yeah, too few people do it. And then I noticed the ones that do get attacked. So thanks for doing it, man. And you have anything to promote besides your book or something?
Apart from Mintpress News, I don't know. Just follow me on Twitter at Alan R. MacLeod. That's MacLeod spelled MacLeod.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it.
Cool. My pleasure.
Because I can't get right. Because I can't get right. Yeah. You're listening to Can't